I've got a terminology question. So, my area, art history, I also teach in humanities, has this really difficult thing where we talk about a Western world, we talk about an Eastern world, and then like partway through a survey, we get to an Islamic world, which is not the same unit of measure. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty obvious for my students that when Egypt and Sumeria go from somehow being the Western world to the Islamic world, that we're dealing with like apples and motor oil or something, it's really, really different. And so one of the issues that I have with the term the Islamic world or Islamic art is it usually is implying majority rule or actual rulership by the Muslim community or implies religious rule. Mm-hmm. And of course, that leaves out a lot of really important communities that were not majority Muslim, but with so many Muslims being part of trading caravans and bringing the religion to all kinds of places like northeast China, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All the way to Xi'an, where southern India, which isn't usually part of the study of Islam in India. I ran across this term, I think Hodgson coined
Mm-hmm.
it, which is
Hodgson.
Islamicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering how you two felt about the term Islamicate, which sounded good to me. So for people who don't know, it's the sphere of influence mm-hmm. with that Islam has, as opposed to like a world which is based on the rule of Islam. Mm-hmm. I wondered how you two felt about that term and if there's baggage I'm missing with that term.
How do you feel about the term the Middle East?
Well, it's only the Middle East depending on where you're standing.
That's what I mean.
It's a Eurocentric perspective.
Now North Africa is not the Middle East. It used to be the Middle East for a long time. And so why is it the Middle East when it's where I come from is more West than Germany, but it's the Middle East. Mm-hmm. So it's just conventions. And some people are putting terms on this.
With regard to the term Islamicate, no, ATE. Islamicate, almost, yeah.
And it's used, for instance, if you have someone who is Jewish or Christian but lived in the Muslim world, so he is part of the Islamicate world, according to Hodgson. Yeah.
I think one of the issues that it gets caught up when you talk about baggage is sort of culture versus religion. And is that really, there's a kind of debate about whether you can really separate culture and religion. They're so enmeshed that it's almost kind of an artificial distinction. It's a distinction that is very easy for us to make in the United States because we are a nation of, people who come from all over. And so it's, this idea of sort of religious freedom and so on. So when Catholicism or Islam comes to the United States, it often looks very different than, let's say, Catholicism in Europe or Islam in the So it makes sense, I think, here in this kind of a context. But I think the word Islamicate is actually useful in some ways because, let's say, for example, music that developed in the Islamic world. So can you talk about Islamic music? There are, a lot of Muslims, or at least some Muslims, who would say, music is haram. Like music, you're not supposed to listen to music other than the chanting of the Quran. Or, other people would put different restrictions. The human voice is all right in drums, but not stringed instruments. Or, so the whole question of music is something that was debated. At the same time, you have tremendously beautiful musical traditions that develop in Islamic Spain, in India, in Iran, in the Arab world. So if you were going to say this is Islamic music, the lyrics may not, often they are, but they may not be Islamic, but they come out of a particular culture. And so therefore, as you were saying, are influenced by that culture. Or in art history, I think it's useful because when you say, for example, Buddhist art, you're usually thinking about iconography, right? You're thinking about art that actually serves a purpose within the religion that might be in a temple, that people might make as a shrine or put as a home shrine. Same thing when you talk about Catholic art or Christian art or Byzantine art. You're talking about art that has very explicitly religious themes and often is used in a liturgical or religious context. you know, what do you do then, let's say, with Persian miniatures or miniatures from the Indian world? Some of them have, some of them might be depicting figures from Islamic history or Islamic religious history, and some of them might be totally secular, like people having a garden party, or something. But yet they all have a similar kind of artistic style. So you wouldn't necessarily say that's Islamic art or Muslim art. Of course, that would never be used in any kind of, liturgical way. Or let's say, you might have daily objects that have some Quranic verses or formulas, Islamic formulas on them. Is that Islamic art? It has Islamic motifs, but it's not like, a chalice that would be used in a church. It doesn't have a liturgical purpose. So I think in art history, that might be one place where it doesn't have to be a controversial term. It can help the fact that Islamic art is different than arts that have, important iconographic traditions.
There's a lot of syncretism as well, which would really help me in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the term the Islamic world infers that there is a singular Islamic world,
right,
as opposed to many communities of Muslims throughout time in lots of different places. You mentioned it doesn't have to be controversial. I do want to know the baggage that might go with it.
With music, you mean?
No, with the term Islamicate. Is there anything in terms of how it's viewed?
Yeah. It's not. Marshall Hodgson is, of course, still an extremely influential scholar, but people don't use it as much anymore. I think because they see it as a term that's sort of imposed from the outside, right, upon the Islamic kids or not, just Islamic world, right? Usually we would say Muslim majority world. Mm-hmm.
Makes more sense.
To say these are countries that have majority, Muslim populations, but and sometimes the issues that arise in a Muslim majority country are very different than issues that arise for Muslim minorities. Even, let's say, a place like India, where there's a huge Muslim population, but it's still a minority within its own context. And so we tend to say minority Muslim communities or Muslim majority countries or Muslim majority contexts. That puts the emphasis back on the people who are practicing rather than on some kind of arbitrary idea of what is Muslim or not Muslim or what is Islamic or not Islamic. And I would just say there's an interesting book, very good book, written by Cemil Aydin called The Idea of the Islamic World. And it's about how this concept of an Islamic world as a kind of construct emerges, and of course problematizing that idea. Cemil is spelled Cemil. It's the Turkish spelling, and the last name is Aydin, Aydin.
Actually, it's not even the Islamic word. The attribute Islamic is used for everything. And personally, I find it a little bit not a little bit, very problematic, because imagine whatever you do is called Christian. Right. It's almost like you feel, if I smile because I'm a Muslim, my smile is Islamic or not. Like it's used, overly misused, let's say. It's not even the notion of an Islamic world, homogeneous, somewhere existing, I don't know where, but it's also Islamic everything.